Hey, everybody. Well, I figured we'd start out the old long essay with a little Purple Shirt Monday. I know it is not Monday, it's Friday, but hey, you know what? It's our first real kind of get together thing, and so I figured it'd be a good way to start. I would like you to note I am also wearing pants. All right, I don't know if anybody saw that whole strategy on Walmart is apparently selling more tops than bottoms because so many people working from home, they're just wearing shirts and not pants. I don't know what is more strange, that or the fact that Walmart refers to it as tops and bottoms. I don't really understand why they don't just say shirts and pants, or throw skirts in there, right? But tops and bottoms, it's weird to me. So anyway, before we get started, I'm a little parched. Mountain Dew time. You can see the Green Mountains, just so everybody knows. All right, clearing that. All right, and so the old long essay. All right, here's the deal, everybody. This is pretty much going to be your assessment for everything we've done in old phase 1 and 2 so far. And so I'm looking to have this due by the 17th. All right. All you need to do next week is worry about the long essay. All right. Since you've never done one before, there's some rules that are a little bit different than a DBQ. Good news, it's shorter. All right. So you don't have to worry about that. But here are those rules. And I'll be sending you all these in photo form as well. I went old school and used Augustus's crayons and markers. There are no crayons. I don't know why I said crayons. You can blatantly see there are no crayons on here. Really wanted to use crayons, and then I figured you probably wouldn't be able to read it. So I went with straight up markers. All right. So here's the deal. Rule number 1, all right. The essay in the past, depending upon your question, it can be 4 paragraphs. However, you can scratch this one because the question I'm giving you, which I do think is going to be a fairly easy one, is going to be 5 paragraphs still. So you're going to have an intro, you're going to have 3 main body paragraphs, and you're going to have a closing. All right? Now, with a long essay, there are no documents. All right? There are no documents for you to read, no documents for you to analyze, no documents for you to cite. I suppose that's good if you don't like reading. All right? Problem with that is you can't bullcrap your way through it with an analysis of the documents. You're going to have to rely on a lot of prior knowledge. So, because there are no documents, remember the DBQ is usually 2 document references, 2 prior knowledge per paragraph. This is going to be 4 prior knowledge per paragraph. So when you're all said and done, you should have 12 as a minimum pieces of prior knowledge. All right. Because of that, for that reason, that now moves us to number 3. In a DBQ, I have often told you not to explain your prior knowledge to me, right? Because I know what it is, all right? However, in making your argument here, you do want to, in a long essay, explain the crap out of your prior knowledge. Like, just to get yourself some length on that paper, explain the crap out of your prior knowledge, all right? Also, basics, though, that are exactly like the DBQ is the mechanics stuff, all right? So, no personal pronouns. You want to have transitions between your paragraphs and the main body. Speak in the past tense because this is not happening now. You did not do it, all right? Other people did, and you were talking about other people having done it, and all that type of stuff. So, does that make sense, everybody? If it doesn't, you can always email me, and I will answer your questions toot sweet, all right? I don't know if that was proper use of toot sweet, but I'm rolling with it. So here is your question, all right? It is, analyze how the Cold War altered, I can't read it, there we go, the role of the U.S. in the world from 1945 to 1980, all right? So here's the easy way to do this, which is why I say you should probably go with with 3 main body paragraphs. You're going to have one that deals with post-World War II to 1950s, then you're going to, through the 1950s, then you're going to deal with all the stuff that happens in the 60s, then you're going to deal with stuff that happens in the 1970s, all right? So that's how you would set that up for your graphic organizer, all right? And now here is how I would do that per column. Now, keep in mind, everything I'm going to say here is what you could say in your answer. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to say all of it. Remember that the more you use, the better. All right, that's the key thing there. All right, hold on. Hey, get living room. Get going. What? Pause. Why?
Fluffy last time.
No, Fluffy's fine. Here, come.
Remember he got stuck down there?
I know. Here, come here and show him your Stormtrooper mask real quick. No, that wasn't Fluffy that got stuck there. It was Spotty, remember?
Yes.
All right, come say hi on your Stormtrooper mask and then get back out there. He's going to be fine.
Bye.
All right. Boom. There you go. Say hi, everybody.
Hi.
All right. Good deal. All right. Go shoot some more things. Okay. Except the animals. Don't shoot the animals.
I know.
All right, good. All right, so anyway, as you can see, this is going to be unedited. All right. And so here's the deal. All right. What we have here, okay, is the pre-World War II to the 1950s column. Now, again, you could say all this stuff, and bravo, good grade for you if you do. The more you say, the better, all right? But it is not required. It is not mandatory, all right? Okay, so here's the deal, all right? But what you do want to do is you want to use this to explain how the United States got more actively involved during the Cold War, all right, and shaped a lot of the politics of it all. So what I would do before you even get into this is your intro paragraph essentially wants to define the Cold War, right? So if you remember from your study guide, right, on the test that we never took, all right, that'll actually probably come in handy pretty well for this DBQ. It's the idea that, the Cold War is essentially the United States and the Soviet Union using conflicts in developing third world nations to promote each other's ideology and try to spread it across the globe, right? And so what ends up happening is the Soviet Union and the United States never actually fight with each other, but they use the conflicts and soldiers in other countries to fight each other's ideologies, right? So you want to express that in your intro, and then the rest of your essay gets into how the United States kind of enters the fray with the Soviet Union with that policy in mind, if that makes sense. All right. So your first main body paragraph is going to be pre-World War II, pre-World War II, or that should actually say post-World War II. All right. So we're going to cross that out. All right. And we are going to say post. There we go. We are going to say post-World War II right there. All right. And so, as we know, into World War II, you have the Yalta Conference, the two big things that come out of the Yalta Conference. Eastern Europe is supposed to have free elections, all right, because that is Soviet-controlled territory. And, of course, what do the Soviets do? They rig all the elections so that they have communist support governments winning. All right. Germany, of course, is divided east and west. East goes to the Soviets. West goes to Britain, France, and the United States. Those territories are then, of course, consolidated into a Western pro-democracy, West Germany and West Berlin. All right. Then, of course, George Kennan, a.k.a. Mr. X, writes his telegram to Truman talking about the idea that the Soviets are going to aggressively expand in order to protect their ideologies and protect them from another invasion. And so, therefore, he suggests we almost treat communism like a disease, right? We contain it where it is. We're not going to defeat the Soviet Union. We're not going to invade the Soviet Union, but we need to make sure they don't spread. And if we need to use military force through that or money or however we're going to do that, we need to contain its spread. All right. Key early issues of containment, I should say examples of containment. Truman Doctrine, right? Aid, money, and food and supplies to Greece and Turkey. Greece, right? Just think the food. In order to stop communist revolts there. The Marshall Plan, one of the nicest, coolest things we ever did for the entire European continent. Well, all right. Western Europe, my bad. All right, we give them billions of dollars in order to rebuild their economies, because what is the best thing to stop a communist revolution? A good economy. Only countries with really terrible, crappy economies have communist revolutions. So make their economy good, and they will not revolt, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I have a car and a house and a wife and a kid and pets, right? And at the end of the day, I just want to go home and I want to barbecue a steak and binge watch Vikings or some other show, right? And so why the heck would I want to throw Molotov cocktails in the streets demanding communist revolt when I've got all those things, all right? If I don't have those things, what have I got to lose? Molotov cocktail it up. All right. So then we go into Berlin Airlift, right? Remember, the Soviets cut off West Berlin so that we can't supply it. They want us to leave. We have multiple options: abandon it, which makes us look weak, and run the blockade, which causes potentially World War III, or we can airdrop supplies until the Soviets give up. That's what we do, and it makes us look super awesome, right? Then, of course, you have the Korean War at that time. Does two key things. Korean War is the first limited war. We're looking to prevent big conflicts that could expand into World War III. So what we're doing now is only fighting in the region of the conflict, right? But it also, the bigger issue is it says that we will now use military force to support containment, all right? All of those things are Truman presidency because he's the man. All right. Now we have Eisenhower, 7 through 9. He creates the concept of brinkmanship, all right, military-industrial complex, okay, and the idea that we are going to focus on nuclear weapons instead of conventional ones, right? Conventional weapons being tanks, planes, ships, all that type of stuff. Now we're going to focus on nukes, all right? Now this creates a military weapons buildup, which then gets us into that whole scare of, global holocaust. But as we know, nuclear weapons have prevented war, all right? Nuclear weapons prevented the Soviet Union and the United States, all right, from going to an actual hot war because no one wins a nuclear holocaust, all right? So here's the deal. Mutually assured destruction is a part of brinkmanship, this idea that that's why we don't fight, because we will all destroy each other, all right? Hungarian Revolt, that is a no bueno moment for the United States of America, because in everything that we are creating and doing, which is not on this list that I should have added on there, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the alliance behind that, and preventing a Soviet invasion of Western Europe. The Soviets then counter with the Warsaw Pact, which is done to prevent us from invading Eastern Europe, and deterrent in that regard. All those things, obviously make the United States a major player in global policy. However, the Hungarian Revolt, when Hungary tries to overthrow their communist regime, all right, and the Soviets roll in there with tanks, machine guns, and kill everybody, and we do nothing. And that essentially is us admitting that we will not interfere with the Soviet control of Eastern Europe. All right, it's a big and it's a little embarrassing moment for us. It's one of those things where we acknowledge that, containment is going to be the thing here. We're going to stop it from spreading. We are not going to interfere ourselves where it already exists. It's going to be more in those insurgency type things. And that's when the CIA is going to get big, and the whole idea of maybe overthrowing governments rather than military invasion. All right. And so that really would cover you on that, except I am going to add NATO and Warsaw Pact there. All right, just going to throw that out there. I can't believe I forgot that. I'm a little ashamed of myself. Remember that NATO is our alliance. All right, and Warsaw Pact is the Soviet response to NATO. Cool? All right, that brings us now, again, 4 of these as a minimum. You want to do more? I love you. Okay, so next one gets into the 60s. This would be your second main body paragraph. All right, multiple things you can talk about here. Bay of Pigs, Cuban Missile Crisis, those things almost go hand in hand, right? Remember that ultimately, when the Cuban Missile Crisis is over, the 3 big things out of that is that the Soviets will remove their weapons. That's all great, right? But we also then promised to never try to invade the Cuban island again, like as we had tried in the failure of Bay of Pigs. All right, and then also we agreed to remove missiles that are stationed in Turkey, which are, strategically speaking, about this similar to what the Soviets would have had in Cuba had those missiles stayed. Berlin Wall, don't forget, they start building it, right? And then Kennedy goes on a plane, gets in Berlin, and he says, Ich nie Berliner, which is essentially like, I am a Berliner, and the crowd goes wild, because that is us admitting or stating that we will not abandon the city of Berlin, West Berlin, regardless of what the Soviets do. Then you get into the Johnson era of Vietnam, right? This big supporting idea of domino theory, which is major with containment, kind of goes hand in hand. This idea that we're going to contain communism because it is like a disease. If one country in a region falls to communism, and then all these other countries in the region are going to fall. So Southeast Asia, right? French Indochina, all that same area in here, right? Is a group of countries, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, right? All these countries. And so if North Vietnam, right, succeeds in converting South Vietnam to communism, then all those other countries in that region will go communist as well. All right. Essentially, remember, in North Vietnam is communist backed with Ho Chi Minh. All right. The U.S. backed South Vietnam. All right. And the the fight essentially ensues over would South Vietnam link up and unite with North Vietnam to make one whole communist Vietnam, right? What gets us into that fight, of course, is the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which will eventually come out in the Pentagon Papers, is found to be false and never did actually occur. All right, and then, of course, the fighting that ensues, there is no real goal in mind like a traditional conflict other than trying to stop insurgency, which means there's no like these guys are communists over here and we're going to take these guys out and then move into this position and take these guys out, and then that of course will then end this type of strategic point for the communists, and then of course their leadership will collapse and then bam, we win. There is none of that. There's some communists out in the jungle. We fly in helicopters out there, we walk through the jungle. All right, they attack us, we then respond and hopefully kill more of them, higher body count, we win, we get back in our helicopters, leave back to a fire base, thus pretty much allowing the communists to take back control of that position. That is the problem of Vietnam. It is highlighted by the fact of the Tet Offensive of 1968, right, when General Westmoreland gets on national television and says, hey, we're winning, Christmas, it's over, we've killed so many of them that there's no way they can resist us, we're good to go. About 3 weeks later, every major military position that the U.S. holds throughout South Vietnam is simultaneously attacked, and everyone sees it on live TV, and everybody's like, what the frig are you guys doing over there, right? It is that turning point. It is that moment when Americans start to say, why Vietnam, right? Like before, 65 to 68, most of the letters you read, people would have been like, oh, yeah, Vietnam, containment, domino theory, bam, let's do it, America. Right, Star Spangled Banner, barbecues, yes. After 68, everybody's like, there's no goal here, there's no purpose here, what are we doing? Understand that militarily, the NVA and VC operations and the attacks on American positions in the Tet Offensive all fail. It militarily doesn't work. It's the political consequences at home that are going to make that turning tide and that big shift, all right? So keep that in mind. So that takes us through the 60s, all right? And then your final paragraph in the 1970s, all right, is mainly the Nixon stuff, all right? So this is going to come in handy. I'm going to pause because I am parched. Hang on. Oh, God, that's good. All right. And so here we have the 1970s, all right, with Nixon's Vietnam. You have his plan of Vietnamization. He wants to gradually pull us out of the conflict, all right? He ramps up bombing as a means to try and pressure the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong to go to the peace talk tables. But at the same time, he is slowly pulling out American troops and trying to turn the war back over to the ARVN, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the South Vietnamese Army, right? Eventually, the Paris Peace Accords, which ends U.S. involvement in Vietnam. The war will continue for 2 more years, and of course, the North Vietnamese win because, spoiler alert, Vietnam is now one country, communist. All right, a brilliant foreign policy move here. All right, Nixon gets a lot of crap, as he should. All right, but he was really a foreign policy genius in this regard. A lot of people like to think that the Soviet Union and China were buddies because they were communists. Well, the problem is the Chinese did not have a bourgeoisie class within their society like the Soviets did. So their communist revolution was really ideologically very different than the Soviet one. All right. And so as a result, it puts them at odds. And one big reason Russia never invaded Eastern Europe is because a third of their army was usually on the Western Europe. Never invaded Western Europe, I apologize, is that a third of the Russian army was on, the Russian-Chinese border, because that could have blown up as well. So we see this as an opportunity. We've been ignoring China this whole time, right? Since the Chinese Civil War in 1949 up until now, 1972, Thailand has been Thailand. No, it hasn't. Taiwan has been China, right? Taiwan, we recognize as China. They even sit on the UN as China. Hence the reason why the Korean War went through. And then China's just this blank spot. Well, now we see the strategic importance of this in dealing with the Soviet Union, because we want to de-escalate the Cold War, but we don't want to ask to de-escalate the Cold War because that would make us look weak. We want the Soviets to come to us and ask to de-escalate it so they look weak. So how do we do that? We make them nervous. How do we make them nervous? China. All right? So what we end up doing is we start this kind of just little, dancing kind of diplomatic motion overtures. Ping pong was involved, reason why it's in Forrest Gump. And eventually the Chinese invite Nixon to visit. All right. Well, so those visits then lead to eventual opening trade with China as an economic partner. Now, this scares the living crap out of the Soviet Union because a China-U.S. alliance is detrimental to them. So they then come to Nixon and the U.S. government wanting to open up this idea of de-escalating the Cold War. And that is how we're able to achieve détente, which is the purposeful de-escalation of the Cold War. And we had always wanted that, but we couldn't look weak. And so we got the Soviets to do it by creating that China alliance. And of course, that alliance and that trade agreement also now opens and paves the way for China to have the economic system they have now and be the economic powerhouse they are. So that is your third paragraph. Your closing just kind of restates the idea of the intensity of the Cold War, what the Cold War is, and how the United States took a number of actions to insert itself in global policy when that was all going down. All right, so that's kind of the key there. Intro, describe the Cold War. All right, and what it is, and how the U.S. became a major player with it because of the end of World War II. All right, first main body paragraph, post World War II, 1950s, and it gets into the whole concept of what we do to establish the whole international relationship with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The 50s kind of talks about how that shifts and changes a little bit, and how like the chess pieces, are starting to kind of like stabilize. They're starting to like not move, right, in that regard. And then you get into the 60s as we expand more globally in places like Vietnam to try to stop the spread of the Cold War. And then, of course, you get into Nixon and the China visit and the détente and all that type of stuff. And you should be all good. So if anybody has any questions, all right, make sure you email me and I will answer them to the best of my ability. I'll describe all this in my email that I send it to you with this link. But do keep in mind that this won't be due until the 17th, all right, which is the Friday before what would traditionally be our April vacation. All right. So with that said, I love you guys. All right. And air high fives for everybody. All right. I hope to see you. All right. Sooner than later. All right. And I know I hold on to hope that we will because we still have some great memories to make. All right. Love you.